Hello, I'm Bully. This is another Lessons Learned, a series where a little more casual, where I talk about things about TTRPGs that I've learned the hard way. So I'm going to share what I've learned with you, so you don't have to learn it the hard way. Ideally, these are made in response to questions I get. I got a question, a good question, that got me thinking about a lot of other things. Tonight, we're going to be talking about homebrew. I have thoughts, feelings, opinions. I'm going to share them with you. And then I'll get into a specific homebrew scenario in response to a question I got, because I want to make these videos in response to questions. So this is proof. I'll do it. Hopefully it's not a question that needs to be answered right away in an emergency, because as this poor bloke's about to learn, sometimes it takes me a while. Sometimes I actually do this video and a video reviewing a LARP book, and then something fucks up and I lose the videos and I just don't have them. I can't do it again. I'm doing it again for you and for me. But yeah, let's get into it. I'm going to be talking about a lot of homebrew as a whole, and then I'm going to answer this question, how to homebrew other shifters into your Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition game. So let's start with the question. This is from Blake. He says, I just watched one of your videos on Werewolf the Apocalypse in preparation for running my own chronicle. I was wondering if I could ask you for advice on modifying the rules. Yes, you can. Absolutely. And already answering some of your stuff. My players want to play a variety of were creatures, and I was trying to figure out a way to manage the mechanics to suit that. For example, having characters based on prey animals gain rage by encountering danger, which activates their fight or flight reflex, and so on. I'd really appreciate any feedback or suggestions you have. Okay, this is good. I like this. And this gets me talking about some other things, which I'm going to start big, and then I'm going to get into it. And I am going to specifically answer your question a few different ways, actually. First of all, let's talk about homebrew. So, first things first, and this, I'm talking about homebrew coming from the players, not homebrew you do as a storyteller, because really everything's homebrew as a storyteller, right? But first thing, if a player's like, hey, I want to homebrew this thing, say, hey, why are you doing that? Why do you want to do this? Tell me what you're really up to. It's the first thing you do. Bring them in real close and say, what are you doing here? If they give you a good answer, then we could proceed. I'm not anti-player introduced homebrew or requested homebrew. It's a bigger deal, I think, than people realize or make it out to be. Especially players, because they don't fucking know how hard this could be. So it's very important to clearly understand why. When it comes to a storyteller changing things for themselves, you don't have to go through these steps. Again, this is coming from a player. And this applies if the player comes to you saying, hey, I found this homebrew or I made this homebrew, versus, hey, can you do this homebrew so I could do this thing? Figure out why they want this homebrew. The player might just be like, oh, I think this is a cool idea. And is it like, for the shifter example of like, hey, it'd be cool to play other things besides just wolves. I know you could shift into other creatures according to the lore, which, yeah, sounds like a fun concept, sure. They might not realize how much work they've just asked you to do for something that if you were like, hey, I could do this, but like it's a lot. And especially if you're a new storyteller, or this is your first time running this game, or it's a lot of things where if that's another thing you want to take on, because homebrew doesn't just, now you have to also be a game designer on top of all the other things a storyteller has to be, which that's usually one of the only things you don't have to do. So, and the player might be like, oh no, if it's a big deal, that's fine. But if they're really adamant of like, I need this, or if it's something like you love that idea and you want to figure it out, then you can proceed. But just, it's good to have that conversation that they know what they're really asking, because asking someone to homebrew It's quite an undertaking, especially if you're a storyteller who takes that very seriously and is really going to try to do a good job and think of everything and get the mechanics right. What a daunting task. Fun task. I kind of like doing it, but also, as long as everyone understands, this is work on top of all the other work you have to do. Especially, this is a whole other video. This is a perception thing of some of us, if you're like me, a real prep freak, probably doing an unreasonable amount of work for just like a fraction to actually be seen by the players in the game. Even though a lot of stuff went on behind the scenes or to get to that moment and whatnot. Though, I mean, some storytellers know just wing everything and improv it all. It's probably even harder to ask them to homebrew then, because now you're asking them to do a lot more stuff. And again, it's not a bad thing. Feel free to ask. Just know what you're asking. And like I said, some storytellers love it. Also, as a player, be honest about why you're asking for homebrew. Is there like a fun mechanic you want to do that you think's like going to be really strong or cool in play or whatever? Is it like, if there's a mechanic or gimmick or power that you want and you're trying to create homebrew around that, is it worth it? Let me work it. The answer is probably not. And I get the whole like, oh, I thought of a fun idea. Can I implement this in your game? But also, could you not think of any other fun ideas? That's the only idea you're going to have fun with, is the one that requires a ton of extra work from the storyteller and probably constant adjustments as throughout the whole chronicle and things like that. Or maybe are there other options that are maybe just as fun, maybe even more fun? Like really think it out. Really make sure like you better want it. I also have a hard time believing someone who's like so creatively or inspired by a homebrew concept. If you're the type of person with like that much creativity, I feel like you're also the type of person that could come up with a great concept using the many options already available to you. Again, this sounds very anti-homebrew. It's not. I just want people to make sure they take it seriously. This isn't a game. But for the player, you really need it, and the storyteller's excited to figure out. We've got some homebrewing to do, so let's talk about homebrewing. When it comes to homebrew, there's an order of operations I think should be applied on your approach, with 3 different options, roughly. The first thing is reflavor. Can you just reflavor existing things, get what you want out of your homebrew without having to mess with the mechanics? Then there's the option of altering or making exceptions for existing mechanics rather than, and then the final stage, the hardest stage of homebrew, the most involved in work, is just creating brand new mechanics to be used for the game. So that should be your level of escalation of see if these other options work before getting there. Now, reflavoring is, I guess, homebrew, but it's something I love. I encourage. Go for it. I think this, if you're a storyteller, there's a problem with reflavoring. Now I'm looking at you weird. Now I'm on the player's side. And I mean, with exceptions, of course. Basically, reflavoring is the idea of, because again, this is a game of the imagination. You can say, okay, I'm doing this mechanic, but can I flavor it to where it appears like this, or it's actually I received this power because of this reason, not because of that. Like things that don't change anything mechanically, but is flair or narrative or extra sort of dressing on your character that is interesting to you, and it's narrative. It works for the story. I think that should be encouraged, and that's something I as a player do often. I really like taking concepts and being like, oh, what's another approach to this concept that's fun for me? I think people do this a lot just for fun. You can find all sorts of videos talking about like D&D. People love being like, oh, let's take a fictional character. What class would they be in D&D? It's never, well, we need to make new rules. It's usually like, oh, well, I could see this ability kind of being like this ranger ability or this spell or something. It's people do that. We have the ability to we can see a concept that's flavor wise doesn't fit with it, and then tweak things to where let's match a mechanic to it and bridge that gap. Do that. That's fun. Also, if you're homebrewing, if that's your reason for doing a thing because you think it makes for a cool story, that's going to have longevity. If you're homebrewing because you want a gimmick or a mechanic, you're eventually probably going to get sick of it, and that's not a great foundation for a character or concept. If you start with your narrative concept and then you need to reflavor things that fit that you're probably going to really be attached to that and enjoy playing that and be able to expand upon it. World of Darkness is especially open to this concept as in its design, where there's not a lot of restrictive mechanics for flavor and things like that. You already kind of get to you create flavor your character however you want, and then decide what their mechanics are. So it's kind of built in inherently to World of Darkness, and probably why I like the storyteller system so much. An example of this is I'll use D&D because that's the big one, right? I've played a barbarian who, again, barbarians have rage and things like this. They get angry and they fight things, and makes sense narratively, mechanically, whatever. But I played a character who I like the idea of rage, but I reflavored as a battle focus, because me yelling and being angry doesn't matter mechanically, right? That doesn't change anything, and that's not the most interesting concept for me. I had someone who would, essentially it's like getting in a flow state, and the idea of someone gets into the zone in a fight and is able to fight more efficiently, I think it's cool flavor. And so instead of being I rage, it was okay, I'm locking in, I'm getting into the zone, or I'm pushing out distractions and focusing just on the kill or whatever. It's other cool ways to flavor it. I was using rage, nothing changed in the game. I didn't have to do anything different. The rules didn't change. My dungeon master didn't have to do anything. But I got a cool narrative flair on, instead of just playing a mindless barbarian. I do this often as a storyteller for my World of Darkness games. I reflavor disciplines and things a lot. The way other people might implement their disciplines. It's fun seeing characters not sure what was used necessarily, or not be able to immediately identify stuff, where mechanically this effect is the exact same thing as one in the book, but the delivery of it, the narrative around it, kind of obscured what it might be, or made it more interesting and connected to the character that did it, so you kind of remembered it more. You're also, I say this all the time, you're allowed to change lore even to suit your story. No one cares if you're running a canon accurate game. That's not a thing. It doesn't exist. Flavor, lore, change it. You're already making things up by running a tabletop role-playing game. You can make up a little bit more and you'll be okay. So if you can reflavor your way into your player getting what they want, always go with that first. That's usually a great option and pretty easy to do, and really is more of a fun, creative narrative exercise that's going to help them dive into their concept more than coming up with mechanics. Now, if you do need to change up some rules, the second level in our order is to alter existing rules. Use templates from other mechanics when possible. If you're creating a new discipline and things like that, follow the pattern that's established in other disciplines and try to base it off of that. Or you can also just hand wave some rules. That's kind of I guess it's house rules, but it's also that's homebrew in a way, of I want to play a Ventru who knows blood sorcery, but I don't want one of the only predator types that gives me that. If it works for your story, it makes sense, you have a cool reason for it, take the predator type you want and then pick a different discipline than the one that's assigned there. Probably not going to hurt anybody. Again, a lot of things in World of Darkness aren't designed for mechanical balance as much as a narrative. Those powers are attached to those predator types because they work with those predator types. If you have another reason why another one works, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't allow that. So that's a form of homebrewing, but really, again, it's just omitting or swapping rules around And like I said, if you're creating new ones, try to use existing ones as a template. Now, if there's no choice but to just create something from scratch mechanic-wise, you've got some work to do. What you create is going to not only like give a new option for your player, but also might fundamentally like change a concept of the game that you didn't even really realize until you're running into it mid-session, and then you gotta adjust on the fly, and it's just can be a mess. If you love it and you want to do it. Most important thing is to make sure, I mean, you're all allowed to like change your mind. If you make a rule or you make a mechanic or a homebrew and you realize, oh, this isn't working, if you're a player, don't be shitty and be like, well, this is what it is, so like you're gonna change this or you're gonna nerf it on me. Yeah, we are. That's what happens. That's what game design is. And it's also a hint that might have just been a mechanical thing they were looking for, and then shouldn't have done it in the first place. Luckily, it's a little easier to create mechanics for World of Darkness because it's less concerned with like the mathematical balance of like combat dice and how they interact and things like that, and set of options. So it's harder to like mess things up fundamentally. You could just create rules that might be interact in weird ways or could be abused in weird ways and just adjust as you go. So if you got a homebrew, this is the system to do it in, I guess. Also, you might homebrew rules that kind of ruin the game fundamentally, but if you're all having fun with it, who cares? You didn't ruin it. You just made a weirder game that you enjoy. You're not doing this to be published or to make other people play with your homebrew who don't want to, so don't get too hung up on it. Also, at this level, don't do this to your storyteller if they're new. Don't make them make new rules before they've even played with the existing rules, especially if you're like a vet who comes in and you really know the rules and you try to make some new storyteller let you get away with some shit. Get out of here. Get out of here with that. So one to look out for. Remember, if you're new and you got someone at your table who like knows their shit and they're like, I have this idea I want to do because I'm sick. I've played all the other ones before. Let me do this. That's when you bring him in and you say, why are you doing this, man? Don't let him. Now, let's apply this to the actual question that was asked. First, you're going to check with those players, why do they want to play other shifters or were creatures or changing breeds or Fera, as they're called. There's some questions to consider and things you want to ask them of, well, one, why, maybe less why do you want to play this other creature, but why don't you want to play a werewolf in Werewolf the Apocalypse? Like other animals I can see could be like interesting, exciting options, especially if you just like have a favorite animal that you think would be cool to be a were creature of. But you're going to be changing a lot of things that I could tell by your question you're already considering that it's going to be pretty daunting. And also ask yourself as a storyteller, did you pick to run Werewolf the Apocalypse because you wanted to tell something other than a Werewolf the Apocalypse story? Because throwing other animals into it does kind of fundamentally already start changing some of the kind of lore and fundamental design of what the game's supposed to provide. Like they have a lot of options and advice in the game on how to run stories centering on very werewolf specific things. There's things like the Geru culture, the Moots, tribe politics, their lore, their history, cairns, the different roles of the auspice, all their different rites and ceremonies, pack dynamics. Having a party of mixed Fera complicates or kind of negates all of this, a lot of this. And again, the book's designed gives you a lot of advice for how to run these kind of specific concepts. So you're either going to have to change or not be able to use a lot of resources in the book that are designed to make this game easier to run for you. So if you're a new storyteller doing this, you're starting off by just kind of giving away a lot of the tools that the book provides for you. And there's also things you need to think about of like the moon. Does that matter anymore? That's a Geru thing. Silver is a weakness. You're going to have to come up with other potential alternatives for each one of the different shifters for that. to kind of keep things in the same realm. Also, I mean, this is supposed to be sort of an action-forward game. You're fighting so Gaia doesn't die, or to avenge Gaia if it's already dead. Are these other creatures going to be able to keep up kind of with a Geru in a fight? You talked about prey were creatures. If they're just going to be like significantly more useless in a fight, you're going to have to figure out whole new ways that they can contribute to this war on Gaia, if that's even a concept you're still using. So, I mean, if everyone's on the same page as you, again, you're not only starting from scratch mechanically, potentially, but you're going to be really having to completely change what the game is about and the lore you're pulling from. Now, these are established in the older editions. Personally, I don't think they did a great job with them. A lot of in the 90s, there was splats for everything, and they balance, and like no one was asking, is this necessary? They were just printing shit, and I think the Farah are an example of that. But I understand it'd be cool to play different animals and whatnot. So let's say you're all on board, you all want to do this, you're all fine undertaking this monumental task, and by all of you, it's going to be on you, the storyteller, primarily. And not only that, you're going to not need to know why they want to just not play werewolves. Each one's going to have a reason for wanting to play the ones they want to play, and you're going to have to kind of work that in as well to keep everyone happy for that decision. Again, what a task, but hey, this is your apocalypse. This is your war. This is your unwinnable battle, and if you're taking it on, I'm here with you. I'm going to help you out. So ask these questions. Make sure you're doing this for the right reasons and your players are doing this for the right reasons. And then we'll go through the steps. Step 1, Reflavor. So to do this, what I would do, and this is probably what I would recommend overall, actually, because, well, that's the first step. Of course I would. They mechanically still play werewolves, but you just say you shift into something else. All you do is reflavor what your character looks like, and if there's lore you want attached to each of the different animals, make that up with your players, or make it up yourself and say, if they want to play these, I assume there's a certain lore or dynamic or culture they're attaching to their creature of choice that they'll want you to implement. And this is a lot of work even for reflavoring. Usually reflavoring is very little work for the storyteller. Even this step is a lot, but easier than new mechanics. Say one of your people wants to be a bear. Congrats, you've shifted into a bear. You still have rage. Your forms still have the same penalties and bonuses. You still have access to gifts, all of that stuff. You just you build a story around the bear stuff rather than the wolf stuff. And then they can flavor, talk about how do you want to reflavor rage. Maybe rage is called something else, but still mechanically works the same. Or maybe, as you talked about, maybe there's a different trigger rather than them getting angry. Maybe them getting scared triggers this resource that they'll use instead of rage. I think you tapped onto something at the fight or flight of, maybe they have to be like threatened, or maybe to be able to get this. And if you kind of do the fight or flight thing, that is useful too, because if everyone has different triggers for their things, that's a lot to keep track of. It's really, hopefully your players keep track of it, not you, and they'll ask like, hey, does this give me whatever my rage is? Because if you have to remember that, and every scene, every action and emotion might be a different trigger for a different person's mechanic, that's a lot. So keeping it close to fight or flight works in the sense that if someone comes and is threatening, provoking your group, that's going to inspire rage in a Geru. That also might inspire, a sense of danger and preservation in one of the prey-coded shifters. So similar scenarios can kind of equally maybe prompt mechanical reactions from everyone. But if you're sticking with the story of your group of Farah are fighting for Gaia, like wolves aren't inherently, I feel like, angry things. So you can just kind of flavor that, hey, if they've been called to action, they all have this anger or this rage or this desperation or something that makes them want to fight to save Mother Earth. So they could be chosen because they can access rage. Maybe that's what ties this group together, is they've all been given this ability in their spirit. If you want to look at old editions for inspiration, like I said, they have a lot of mechanical and lore stuff about the other breeds. Most of them have different forms and auspices. The Werewolf Player's Guide offers rules for the other shifters, complete with, they have all that stuff, their own gifts, rights, merits, even unique combat options. They really dig into it. That'll kind of transition to our one. You can use that for a lot of lore inspiration, and also use that for if we're taking the next step, which is to start to alter some rules, which might be what I do, because the one part that would feel kind of weird to me the most is not changing what happens when you shift as a different animal. If I were to start tweaking mechanics, I would start with that. And you can use some of the old stuff as inspiration if you get a hold of it. Like I said, a lot of the lore I would probably change. You could probably come up with something better than a lot of the stuff that I've read it all. I was looking at some of these options too. I've incorporated these as NPCs in the werewolf game I'm running currently, and I threw a lot of it out. But yeah, just simplified as you're all fighting for Gaia. Maybe you all have access to the spirit realm, so you don't have to change gifts or anything like that. That would be a pain to reorganize a bunch of that stuff. If they're not connected to the moon, they can still just sort of pick their role. I mean, that's what auspices are. So rather than saying, oh, this is because you were born at this time or changed at this time, you just say what was your role, and still follow the and tribe also is really connected to a spirit. So there's no reason other creatures can't have patron spirits as well. Have them pick a patron spirit that aligns with one of the tribes, because again, like they're not wolves. There's this griffin, there's no wind and rat and things like that. There's no reason a rat would only give their powers and their bands and boon to Geru. They can also do it to your bears or tigers or birds or whatever. So you can really still use the tribes, just instead of belonging to a tribe, say, okay, this is your patron spirit. They still follow the same kind of rules for what you get for that, their ban and boon. And then once they have their role or their auspice, and then once they have their patron spirit or their tribe, that follow the same rules for what that opens as far as options for what gifts they could take. So you don't have to completely figure out all the gift mechanics, because again, that'd be the most daunting. And then when it comes to their shifted forms, that's really going to depend on what animal they are. But use the Geru shifting as a example. So if you're fine creating new rules or altering rules, and you're going to have to reflavor a lot and create new lore to go with that as well, then let's get into it. This is kind of a fun experiment to do. So I'm going to, again, we're going to start with the template. We're going to start with the Geru template, and then take section by section how to make a Geru and just translate it over to a different option. I'm going to do this from an order of kind of creating a character more so than a sheet. Because again, this shouldn't be about just the mechanic, right? So first, figure out your story. Are these like, are there any Geru? Is everyone a different animal? In that case, figure out why they're together. Again, they could be called to action by Gaia, same as anything else. They all have a patron spirit who's helping them out as well. Then they can all kind of pick their roles. Or maybe they've been kind of adopted into Geru culture for one reason or another, and they're sort of the pack of outcasts, or made up of other creatures or something weird like that. Could be kind of a fun concept to roll with, and that way you still get to be a pack within a greater Geru dynamic. So you can still use a lot of the stuff in the book, like Geru politics can still be a thing, moots can still be a thing, cairns can still be a thing. you'll probably just be really fighting an uphill battle as far as getting the same respect and whatnot that the other Geru get. But that could be interesting to play out. So if you can use a lot of the werewolf stuff, do it. But if you have an idea that just takes a whole different direction, and more power to you. More work to you, more power to you. Again, just keep it simple, because again, you're going to be doing so much as a storyteller. You don't need to write up the most complicated lore as well. If anything, the players should really be doing the heavy lifting when it comes to their personal character lore. If they want to play a hedgehog, a were-hedgehog, they should probably figure out what were-hedgehog culture is and all of that. Obviously, you'll work with them, approve things, but I assume, again, if they want to play something else, I would imagine they have a big reason and story narrative reason for it too. Again, or else it's not that great of a reason. So let's go through this. I'd start with auspice. So pick an auspice and a patron spirit. So again, the moon is really specifically tied to Geru. You can say it affects the other animals too. There's no reason it doesn't have to, but you're kind of losing out on the whole like howl at the moon thing to get rage, and you're losing a lot of stuff by not having the moon. But auspice is just their job or their role in the pack. Think of it that way, more than what moon phase they were changed under. And all this really affects is what gift choices there are. So this one, easy enough to reflavor. Have them all pick an auspice. Just don't have it be for the same lore reasons. Tribe. This surprisingly is pretty easy too. So, I mean, a tribe is just, those are a group of ideally like-minded werewolves who all follow the same patron spirit. But again, if you're all playing different shifters, you all have spirit forms and connected to the spirit world, there's no reason the patron spirits that help these Geru wouldn't also guide your other animals. Because, I mean, it's not, they're not wolf spirits anyway. You know, you have a griffin, wind, rat, stuff like that. So you can really just pick a tribe as one of the other animals. I would just ignore a lot of the lore stuff. It's like, this is what a typical Shadow Lord's like, or this is what a typical Heart Warden's like. That won't matter because it's Geru specific. But you could still keep like the ban that the patron has. Like the patron spirit doesn't want you to do this, and the boon they give of what you'll get a mechanical bonus on. Keep that and just create your own lore of why that patron spirit chose that character. And then you still use your auspice and tribe to determine what gifts are available to your characters. And I wouldn't mess with any of the gifts. Reflavor them, sure, but they should have access to spirits and gifts the same as anyone else. And again, those gifts are given by a whole range of different spirits, so it doesn't have to be Geru specific. So weirdly, the thing that at a glance might be the hardest is probably the easiest to just reflavor and translate over. You would build your traits the same. An interesting thing you could do is maybe do like a lore sheet for each, if you're really feeling wild. That way maybe you can incorporate some unique abilities tied to those animals, but mechanically tie it into like a lore sheet of like 1 dot where raven ability is this, 2 dot is this, because lore sheets get a little more loose with the templates and how they're balanced, which again, balance isn't a thing in this system. So maybe use that. So it's still like an XP thing they can do, and they can still sort of maybe grow in their abilities with their specific animal, but you don't have to create like new gifts necessarily. I think a lore sheet would do fine in this situation. And then they're tied into background costs, because then a lot of the backgrounds are very specific to werewolves. So this is a way to still spend some of that background cost without having to be a Geru. Renown, again, those are things tied to what's important to Geru culture. But again, depending on your story, if you're still, Geru culture is still a big factor and your pack is involved with them, then keep the renown. maybe you can change this for, each creature has different things that are important to them. But again, that's also assuming that now in your setting, there's enough of a culture of each individual shifter type that they have reputations and renown and things like that. I think they're vague enough, like glory, honor, wisdom, that I feel like that should apply to all of them. I personally would just keep those three, and that way they work with the gifts the same way as well. Forms, something that I imagine this was one of the bigger mechanical pieces that the players would want different, because they don't want just werewolf stats when they're changing into things that aren't werewolves. So they have some examples. They have a spider and raven were creatures in the book, and the antagonist and ally section if you want to look at those. But I would use the Geru as a template, and then we'll start with reflavoring, right? They could have an animal like their human form. Instead of lupus, it's going to be a form that's kind of just mostly a version of the animal. And then do your steps between. Do like a bigger version of that animal, like not a dire wolf, but whatever, or something that makes sense for that creature to get more benefits that are in the realm of the animal. Do one that's more human, but with some of that animal features. And then war form, again, is something, especially you talked about, you have people who want to do like prey style. So I don't know why they would have a war form necessarily. Maybe they do. Maybe it's like a desperation form of their cornered animal form type of thing. But if they want to shift into this ultimate version that Gaia's gifted them for something other than fighting, then make those abilities and bonuses reflect whatever the thing is they want to do. So Krynos is easy because that form is for war. So the changes reflect that. They heal better, they have more health, they do more damage. If something is changed to a form that's supposed to be like very mobile or maybe very stealthy, or I don't know. So just decide what the ideal form of that creature is in its war for Gaia. And maybe it's just war, maybe it's just fighting, then that's easy. But if it's something else, make those tweaks. Let's get the nitty gritty of it. I would keep the rules for regeneration for each form. I would also keep the things that for the gifts that they have to be in supernatural forms to use gifts and things like that. Keep those rules, as well as how rage is used, even if you reflavor what rage is. Then you have to think of delirium, because again, the werewolves are not known entities because of the effect they have, the fear that humans have of seeing them, that they forget. There's a lot of lore that goes along with that too, so you'll have to come up with something like that. I guess it could still be delirium, maybe called like disbelief, something where almost like a mage thing, where reality corrects itself, or humans might see something magical that they don't understand, and in mage, reality fixes it for them. But maybe in this setting, they come up with their own reasons of why they don't believe what they saw. So rather than fear, could just be like disbelief. It has the same mechanical effects as delirium, the shifting and stuff like that. That way they can still like howl at the moon or venerate the moon. They can still do something to get their rage or whatever. It still ties into silver, because I think you should keep something like silver being a weakness. And again, if each animal has a different weakness, it's a lot more for you to keep track of, and it's less, I know, there's something interesting when like a pack runs into an enemy and they realize, oh shit, these people are prepared, they have silver bullets. Where if it's a group of various animals, it's like, oh, they're prepared, they have silver bullets, that only affects that dude. They would need iron bullets for me and gold bullets for that. Like, I think for simplicity, you could come up with lore reasons of why the moon's still connected with your pack, and keep silver as a weakness for you as a storyteller to be able to use more universally, or for it to be more universally scary to your group. So for the near human form, the penalty to social tests makes sense if you're a person with like animal features. Physical tests make sense for the bonus to that because it's a physical transformation you're doing. Shifting, I don't see how it would really alter your social or mental skills besides things like awareness or like maybe wits-based stuff of being perceptive. But again, maybe it does. Maybe if you're a hot animal, maybe shifting doesn't make you stronger, but makes you a little more alluring. Maybe there's some cat-like grace, I don't know, or cat's hot. There's a different community that can tell you what the hot animal features are. War form, as we talked about, just think about like what's the most ramped up version of this animal and why is this the one that's best suited to serve whatever its calling to Gaia is. It doesn't necessarily have to be a combat machine, but that'd be the easiest one to adjust. And you could add different options here as far as like if it's a spider or snake thing, you know, it might have like a poisonous bite or a grapple bonus. A wereboar might have a gore attack. A bear might have even more health than a Krynos does. Just again, it's going to depend on the animal and what your players wants out of shifting and what you want out of shifting. Just I would keep the number of benefits and usefulness comparable to the Geru form as sort of a template. Your big animal form, again, this could be something maybe you swap the bite for some other bonus or ability. Not a lot changes in this. I would keep it simple. And then, yeah, animal form. Again, you can have bonuses depending on something that makes sense for that animal. It's hard to give advice on this without knowing what specific animal we're creating it for, but it should give you a good idea. Some specific Geru traits and lore and mechanics that you'll have to find a substitute for. Think about the moon, as we talked about with some of the different forms. I would just keep the idea that the moon has some sort of spiritual connection with all of your player characters. They still can do something to get their resource, get rage from it. Silver still affects them, all that stuff. I would keep the healing factors that Geru have, because again, that's not necessarily a wolf thing. It's more that they're like chosen as warriors thing. So it makes sense that even if you're not a warrior animal, Gaia would want you to stay alive. So they could take most aggravated damage is half superficial. I would keep that. And the regenerating using rage, I would keep that. Again, whatever you call rage. And keep the weakness to silver and fire. Just makes it easier, less stuff to track all around, and it's nice having common weaknesses that all the players' characters will share. So rage. Yeah, keep that as like, if you're going to reflavor it, reflavor is like it's a spiritual force. So it's not necessarily just being angry. It's literal spiritual power that they can tap into. You mentioning prey is interesting because even in like the old editions, I can't think of any like prey creatures they had. I guess they had some that I guess is like rats and bats. It's the closest you're gonna get. But yeah, maybe call it fear. Desperation, which is a hunter term, but I feel like that could kind of work. Just a general desperation could be what drives them. You know, fighting back against a world that's full of things like trying to kill them. If you could keep the triggers as similar as possible, that's better. But if you want to change it up, like I said, more work for you. But if you do change it to where like, okay, it's not rage, it's this, and these specific things trigger it, make sure a player tracks that for you so you don't have to constantly be prompting them. I would keep how rage works mechanically as far as spending it, like, you know, rage checks and things like that to use gifts and to shift and to regenerate. Renown, gifts, rights, definitely keep the gifts as they are. I would keep renown as it is too, because again, that determines what gifts they can have, and those are general enough things that it would make sense that. And renown isn't just the reputation among the Geru, it's also the spirits that venerate these things. So it makes sense to keep the same types of renown. Just maybe flavor-wise, it's a little more for reputation among the spirit world than the Geru. But I would make sure all your shifters still are like have the lore of being connected to the spirit world. So they have gifts and things like that. And also, that's like one of the coolest parts of the setting is the spirit world number and all of that. So like, keep that for sure. Reflavored as needed. The rites are very specifically like Guru culture. So again, if Guru culture is still a driving force in your game, maybe they can teach them to other animals. Otherwise, yeah, this has to do with like gaining rage and settling disputes and going into I guess a lot of the stuff you could keep as far as like what would make sense is you still need things like travel to the Umbra, or to keep physical things with you, or to gain or lose rage. So I guess a lot of this stuff transfers over. You'll just flavor it in a way that makes sense. Cairn's a big thing. And yeah, that's the whole thing with like wolves having territories. Other animals might not be territorial. Cairn might not make as much sense, but I think it'd be a shame to leave out the whole care mechanics and all the story and narrative stuff you could pull around a cairn. So I would keep the idea that a cairn means something. And again, the cairn I guess doesn't have to just be a werewolf thing. It could be competing with them for it, because other, especially worm tainted things like getting cairns of their own. So definitely keep cairn stuff. Horano and Hoglost. It's also something that you're going to have to figure out, is that's also Garou specific, but I suppose can make sense lore-wise for other creatures of this, if you're giving in to the violence and gaining an apathy because of the state of the world, or just kind of giving up and being overwhelmed. I guess those are concepts that can certainly just apply to the human experience. So I guess, just keep those. They definitely imply a violence though, because you get them from once you like stop care like about casualties and who you kill in this war. So if you're playing a creature that isn't a combat creature, doesn't kill, there might be some lore things you have to do with that, or they just might hardly ever be getting it. Who knows? But yeah, losing oneself to apathy or losing empathy, both of those during war concepts that anyone can theoretically struggle with, I guess. So we keep the mechanics because that's a way to lose your character more so than just dying, that I think's interesting and goes with the themes of the apocalypse. And I think we've covered everything. Those are all the parts mechanically that make up a Garou. So those are all the things that you'll have to transfer over to any of the other shifters. So hopefully that's useful. Not as hard as I thought, actually. This seemed very daunting. And it's a long video, so you know what? I guess it is kind of hard. But you know what? We did it. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully it gives you some stuff to work with, and hopefully it creates less. Hopefully you can realize there's less work involved than you might have initially thought. Because by your question, I could tell you're already thinking of some of the more intricacies and kind of deep about what you might have to change, and it could be a lot. So hopefully piecemealing some of what I've said, that hopefully works for you. Hopefully your players work with you as well to do some of the heavy lifting on their part. And hey, you got yourself a multi-were creature Werewolf the Apocalypse game. I'm intrigued to know how that goes. Specifically what you did lore-wise. And I'm interested in just like the premise of your game then, because like are you still sticking with kind of what's laid out in the book, or are you taking it a whole different direction? I want to hear about it. And also, if you're people who've played the older versions and used some of the other breeds, I'd be interested to hear about that. Or if I missed something, or you have a really good homebrew suggestion for, if I was making this, I would change this or that, share that. I don't have the ultimate answer, and the more people weighing in on this, the more options are hopefully very patient Blake will have. Or he might be well into his campaign already and this is all useless, but hey, maybe this will help the next person. Very much appreciate the question. Gave me a lot to think about and talk about, and I love thinking and talking about TTRPG. So, thank you. Yeah, if you have any other questions, this is a drop them. Message them to me. Leave them in the comments, whatever. I will see them, and I'll probably do a video on them. Even if it's not some big, lengthy thing, I could maybe rapid fire, hit some easier to answer ones that require a less lengthy response. But also, I love the yap, so I could turn any question into a lot of me talking. Okay, I'm happy with that for now. Let's hope I stay happy with it. Let's hope you're happy with it. So yeah, that's my general thoughts on Homebrew as a whole, and then also how to implement other shifters in your Werewolf 5th edition game for your players. So, it's been me. I'm Bully. And those are some of the lessons I've learned. Bye.